12th of February, 2022, Saturday night, Abhayagiri Monastery, Redwood Valley, California. Been a winter retreat, number of readings on metta, with the overarching theme of the 4 guardian meditations of recollection of the Buddha, asubha kammatthana, metta practice, and death contemplation, contemplation of impermanence. But I wanted to talk a little bit about energy, so the arousal of energy. The Buddha talks a lot about striving, and sometimes if we're not in the group setting or if we're left to our own devices, if we're either on retreat or there's just not much of a schedule, say there's not evening puja, then we need to find ways to bring up energy. So partly a talk I need for myself as well. And I was just sent some photos that I hadn't seen yet from some I had seen and some I hadn't seen from practicing in Bodh Gaya with Ajahn Ñāṇiko 5 years ago. So that was nice to be reminded of that, and that there was very much that strong sense of striving and getting each other to arouse energy to meditate more. Now this isn't a tight type of energy, but it's an energy, it was just like perseverance. When you're trying to meditate in India under the Bodhi tree, sitting for 10 hours a day for 6 weeks, then you need to find ways, especially in week 5. Week 5 is like where you sink in quicksand and your energy seems all gone, so you have to find ways to get yourself to meditate. And but then I was getting a little bit in the first session where I was able to get that opportunity to sit at the Bodhi tree. I'm trying to remember if it was that first session or the second session. I think it was the first session where I did 3 weeks. And then the second and third times I was there, those were 6 weeks each. So this was during the first session where I had a very good experience during that first session. And I didn't ever really sit for 10 hours in a day. I would tend to do more walking meditation. But the determination was to sit for 10 hours, and I went into it with some pain in my left knee and a little bit of pain in my back, so I was afraid that it was going to get much worse if I sat a lot. And so, but I thought, well, just try it and see how it goes. And it went well. Within a few days, the pain in my knee and in my back disappeared, and then it went well. And so there we were, sitting for 10 hours a day. And the breaks are generally dictated by when you have to go to the bathroom. So it'd usually be like sit for 2.5 hours, get up, go to the bathroom, have a sort of breakfast in the complex, in the Mahabodhi Stupa complex, meditate another 2.5 hours, go have the meal, go back to the guest house and rest for a bit, go back in the afternoon, and you really only have till about 8:30 p.m. because that's when they start ushering people out, and they have the place closed down by 9 p.m. every night. It opens at 5 a.m., closes at 9 p.m., so you're really limited to that time for actually sitting under the Bodhi tree. So go for about, it might be like 3 hours, get up for a short break, another 2 hours, or it might even be some days going 5 hours straight through, depending on how the body was feeling. And we had our little timers in front of us, and if say Ajahn Ñāṇiko and I sitting next to each other for hours, if like he nudged me and we started chatting about Dhamma for a bit, we'd pause the timers. That didn't count. Or if somebody offered us a drink, that wouldn't count. So we'd have to pause the timers during that time. So that didn't count toward the 10 hours. 10 hours had to actually be the sitting or chanting. If we were doing chanting, that counted as well. So I started getting a bit cocky, like, well, this is kind of easy, actually, sitting for 10 hours. And so I'll try sitting for 11 hours in a day, which entails less rest after the meal. So, wow, okay, I can sit. I sat 11 hours and did it maybe 2 or 3 days in a row. Oh, I can sit 11 hours, okay. And then I started, I'm going to sit 12 hours. So more is better. I'm going to sit 12 hours. And but then I couldn't get to 12 hours with the constraints and everything. And so I had my timer, and I kept getting to like 11 hours and 15 minutes or 11 hours and 30 minutes, but I couldn't get to 12 hours. And the most I was able to do was like 11 hours, and I think it was 11 hours and 37 minutes. I couldn't get past that. And so I told Ajahn Ñāṇiko, I was like, well, I don't think I can get to 12 hours. And he said, we'll do it together. So Kalyanamitta, we'll do it together. And so I thought, okay, so we're going to have like a shorter breakfast time. We decided to eat breakfast at our sit spot, so it was just offered to us there by the lay people, and then we didn't have to like move spots, so we got more sitting in the morning time. And then it entailed no rest after the meal, going straight back to the Bodhi tree. And so we were there, and I was really happy that we were going to do it, and we were doing it together, and had the timers, like, 10 hours, it's still, like, there's a lot of time in the day, still 11 hours, and then it started raining, and so it was like 11 hours and 15 minutes or something, and it started raining, and people just left, and we kind of looked at each other, and then just kept sitting. And then I was kind of like opening one eye, peeking at my timer. And then it was about 11 hours and 30 minutes, and then it started raining hard. And Ajahn Ñāṇiko and I just looked at each other, and he said, Mara. And then we just kind of like, okay, well, we can't move now. So everybody had left. It was just the two of us there. Everybody was gone to seek shelter out of this rain. And there we are, just getting soaked. And so it was raining, and I just had this smile like, this is awesome. And we were both sitting there, just the two of us, and I had this cool reflection of the Buddha come up, that when the Buddha actually sat there, he was all by himself. There was nobody else around. He was all by himself under the Bodhi tree. And it would have been all types of weather there, and he was in absolute solitude, actually. So we got the tiniest little glimpse into maybe some of what the Buddha was experiencing, at least physically, while he was practicing. And then, as this normally goes, the timer gets to 12 hours, and that moment, whoosh, the rain stopped. So, and then we were just like ecstatic, and we were cheering each other that we sat for 12 hours and we hugged. I think it's kind of kind of a strange thing that some people would be congratulating each other on. We just sat still for 12 hours. So I thought that was like really Kalyanamitta. So I thought I would mention that story because I was just reminded of that by being sent these pictures. So one way to bring up energy then is to remember things like that, to recollect experiences like that, because there's a connection between joy and energy. We can't just, not easily anyway, we can't like will ourselves into a kind of irritated energy, like where we're kind of berating ourselves for being lazy. But it has to really be dependent on joy. That energy has to really be dependent on joy coming up. And I guess they kind of work together, like you bring up energy. Like if I'm feeling tired sometimes, then I can actually just think energy and just bring it up. Or sometimes like if I feel physically tired, the mind will attach to that and it'll kind of sync. The body and the mind will sync together. But if I just say, no, just, okay, straighten the back, open the eyes, sometimes might even have to wash the face or something, splash water on my face, or just go outside for a bit. And I find physically and mentally the energy can be brought up. We have reserves. A lot of times we have reserves we didn't realize that we had. This is also the great practice of Longpo Cha, the Wan Pra, the lunar observance, where we're actually able to find those reserves and tap into them and find that actually we had way more than we thought we could do, actually. So we had this incredible potential in the body and mind. So later on in another Bodh Gaya session, this one was, I think it was the last one that we did, where actually, this was where we reached week 5 and where the meditation becomes like drudgery, where you go back to the guest house and crash, fall asleep, and then it seems like the alarm is going off right away and you have to get up again right away, it seems like, because you just, even though you maybe did sleep 5 hours or whatever, still it seems like you're getting up right away and just going back to meditating. And so there was one evening when we got back, it wasn't just Ajahn Ñāṇiko and myself. I think Ajahn Pavaro was there as well, and there was a few others who were we had a little group going. And getting back in the evening, I can't meditate anymore. I can't meditate tomorrow. I just can't do it. And we Ajahn Visalo was there as well. He was actually blowing all of us out of the water. He was sitting 13 hours a day, every day for the whole session. But he was there, I think he was there for like the last 3 weeks or something, and then he did these ultra sessions, but that's a whole nother level. But I know, at least for Ajahn Ñāṇiko and myself, it's like, okay, that's enough meditation, but we have to get out, do these hours. We made this determination. So then the mind was not leaping out towards going back to the Bodhi tree the next day. It's like, I just want a day off. And so the solution for that was he ended up finding a clip of one of the Rocky movies of just like this like slugfest where like these guys are just like hitting each other in the face and not going down. And somehow that kind of brought up the energy, the impetus to actually get there the next day. So sure enough, we got up the next morning brought up that visualization and sort of made it out to the Bodhi tree. And we were just like, okay, just gotta get out there, get up. And so we got out there and just like, oh my, what's this? This day is just gonna be like hell. And sat down, and then it was like great. It was really great. So pushing through, where we do something even though we have all these ideas that it's going to be horrible, and then that's when we go into uncharted waters. That's when we actually make some progress. And from pushing through that one point, then it's like, oh, well, now it's okay. All right, we can keep going. So a lot of time, it's hard to do that when we're on our own. We do need our Kalyanamitta, so it's good if we're finding various ways to bring up that kind of energy. And it doesn't always have to be at that level. We don't always have to push ourselves into this kind of like round 15 slugfest state. But it is good to recollect, like, how can we actually bring up energy, and thus joy. The joy and energy kind of arising together. Sometimes the energy might have to be brought up first, and then the joy starts to arise. Or sometimes the joy we might have to have some sort of recollection of gratitude, or like those metta reflections of Ajahn Ñāṇiko that are so great. We might have to do that first to kind of give ourselves some energy. There's also the sense of, the word is saddha, that the Buddha talked about, which is normally translated as faith. It can also be thought of as confidence. And there's a sutta I was reviewing that I thought I might read an excerpt from it tomorrow. The wilderness in the heart, I believe it's Majjhima Nikaya 16, where there's different things that if there are these certain wildernesses and shackles in the heart, one is incapable of bringing the Dhamma to fulfillment in the heart. And there's these different obstructions that can come up, and that's, a lot of them deal with lack of confidence in the teacher, the Buddha, lack of confidence in the Dhamma, the efficacy of the Dhamma, the truth of the Dhamma, lack of confidence in the Sangha, lack of confidence in the training, lack of confidence in the precepts. So if we lack confidence, or we don't think that these things, when focused on and made much of, will be efficacious for us, then that lack of confidence leads to a lack of, one is incapable of striving and arousing energy. And that arousal of energy is what's necessary for the establishment of clarity and mindfulness. When we do arouse that kind of energy, the mind can become very, very clear and bright, to come back again and again to that. Ajahn Ñāṇiko talking about samadhi as, rather than focusing a laser, it's more like focusing a pair of binoculars. It's more like focusing a lens, making the whole picture very, very clear. Sometimes our own fear and trepidation can cause like a lack of energy. And this is when being around a teacher or being around a Kruba Ajahn, for those of us who are familiar with Thailand and familiar with some of the great teachers there, such as Luang Por Liam, then it could be incredibly helpful just to be in their presence. There's a verse, I think it's in the Dhammapada, but it might be like the Tibetan tradition rendering of it. It's an arhat, you only have to meet them once, even not spending much time with them, still they'll make you steadfast. So even though I only really was Luang Por Liam's Upatak for 2 weeks. I found that like a very fruitful and memorable time for me. I lived at Wat Pah Pong for one vasa. I was there for 5 months total. And it was near the end, that last 2 weeks, it was during Katina season that I volunteered to be his upatak, his attendant. So he has 2 upataks. So this is a monk at that time in his mid-70s. He needs 2 young upataks to be able to keep up with him. And so it was myself and another monk named Ajahn Ñāṇiko, and he taught me the ropes about upataking Luang Por Liam. And just remember it was Katina season, so I was kind of had this idea like I want to sign up for the most difficult upatak period. Okay, well Katina season is going to be the most difficult because Luang Por is going to be going to all these different Katina ceremonies where they're going to have all-night Dhamma sits often, and going to have to really push myself. And then, as usually happens, like why did I sign up for that period? So we went to this one Katina. It was a place called, we just knew it as Nam Yun, like we're going to Nam Yun. I forget the name of the monastery, but it was where Luang Por Nudang was the abbot, and Ajahn Jayasaro had lived there actually in the early days, and also Luang Por Kemadamo had lived with Luang Por Nudang before. He's a senior Ajahn Chah disciple. I think he's passed away now, possibly. But we went to this monastery, and the Wat Pah Pong monks were building a sala there. And it's quite a big sala, and it needed to be finished enough to have the katina. And so there was welding happening, and they were putting these like bricks up, these like red bricks, to make the walls enough to have the katina ceremony. So it was one of these late night work sessions where there's bricks being schlepped around and lifted up onto high walls, and Luang Por Liam himself is out there pushing wheelbarrows, and there's welding happening, and then there was this huge cleanup. Okay, it was dubbed good enough to have the katina, so there was this huge cleanup, getting towels and mopping the whole like concrete floor. There wasn't any tile or granite yet, but it's just concrete. But we thought we'll clean it up as good as we can for the katina. And then of course all the monks and everybody's there, Luang Por's there, and then at 1 a.m. Luang Por said, "Evang, Evang." So that meant that's good for tonight. So then the fear being, oh my God, tomorrow night is all-night Dhamma talks. Like, what am I going to do? We had this most of the night work session and then all-night Dhamma talks to look forward to. So being the upatak, you have to kind of stay around Luang Por. So I got to bed around 2 a.m. and then had to get up around 4 to get hot water for Luang Por. And at that time I wasn't doing so great. I had had a difficult vasa, and there was another Western monk who was there also, and he was going through a fair amount of difficulties, and I was being a friend to him, so that took a lot of my energy. And so I had dealt with some illness during that vasa, and I wasn't in great shape, both mentally and physically. So, but I was sort of up at 4 a.m., get the water, look after Luang Por. I don't really remember what happened in the morning, but it was like doing this and that. In the morning time, there was the meal. Oh yeah, there was alms round. There was the meal. And usually at Katina, it's like the one time you get breakfast at the Thai monasteries. Like normally they just have the alms round and the one meal a day. They don't have a breakfast. And they have the main meal usually at 8:30 or 9 a.m. And so, but something had happened previously during the vasa where I was actually on alms round, and this other monk I was with was going through some serious difficulties. So actually we sat down together on the alms round and said, okay, let's just eat a bit of rice, just ground ourselves a bit. And I actually ate some rice with this other monk, and we sat and kind of chatted for a bit, and which is against the Korwat, against the rule at Wat Pah Pong to eat anything before the mealtime. And so later on I felt remorseful about this, so I decided I was going to confess it to Luang Por Liam. And so I told this other Ajahn who was at Wat Pah Pong, I was like, I did this, should I confess it with Luang Pa? He's like, yeah, you should do that. I'll listen. I'll go and listen. I want to hear what he says. I said, okay. And so I went and I said, Luang Pa, I broke the Korwat. The Korwat is like the regular standards of the monastery. Sometimes there's things added onto the Vinaya standards. I said, I broke the Korwat. I said, I ate some food on the alms round. I didn't talk about anybody else doing it, but I just said I did it myself. And then he just said, that's okay. Well, that's degeneration. When monks do things like that, please don't do it again. And then that's like all he said. But then later, fast forward back to the story of the Katina. So there were these Thai donuts going around, and some like rice soup in the morning for breakfast. And I was with Luang Pa at that time after getting 2 hours of sleep. And they were passing us these like Thai donuts, and Luang Pa, and again, this time I think I confessed with him, it was like a month and a half before or something. And he said, we only eat one meal a day. And so he didn't take it himself, and he didn't let me have it either. He remembered. He's like, you remember? We eat only one meal a day. So I didn't get the special Katina breakfast. And then through the day, I was getting more and more kind of exhausted. And I was starting to get a bit worried as well, because I thought I might have like a problem with my heart or something if I didn't get any rest. And I was getting a bit nervous. So then around 4 p.m. it was tea time, and Luang Pa, he had a glot set up. He was actually staying under a glot, and he was on this little bench under his glot, The net was tied up, and then I went to help get him some drink in the evening, and it was just me and him, and then I was fanning mosquitoes away from his feet. I was sitting on the ground, and then he was sitting up having a drink, and then I was like, oh, I thought, with my broken Thai at that time, I thought, oh, Luang Pa, maybe I could ask you a question. And he was like, huh? And then I said, my heart's hammering really fast, and I feel like I didn't get enough sleep last night, and isn't it better just to get enough rest? And then he said, Glua dai mai, which means, are you afraid of death? And then I kind of stopped me in my tracks. I thought, I didn't really know what to say, so I just kind of had my hands and then he said, Dai got dai mai ben rai, which means, if you die, you die, it just doesn't matter. And then this flood of joy coming up, that's just what I needed to hear. And I didn't feel tired anymore. My heart stopped racing. It was just from nervousness. It was just from fear. And I think he was pointing directly at that fear, and that was very good teaching. So then, and I was also anticipating these all-night Dhamma talks, how in the world I'm going to be able to do this. But then it's then I felt a bit more at ease, and it just wasn't a problem. I was able to stay up for most of the Dhamma talks. I think when Luang Pa finally packed it in, I decided to go for a rest. Yeah, so sometimes we just need to be pushed by others. I mean, reading the Venerable Father in the beginning of the retreat, you had Warapanyo getting pushed by Ajahn Chah in a way that he never would have, there's no way he ever would have done it on his own. So I guess part of it is acknowledging we just can't do this on our own. We're not just practicing in a vacuum. It's not just us doing our own practice, but it's the whole community. Everybody's supporting each other. And then that kind of builds on itself, and we can remember that. It's pretty amazing to like people like Luangpur Cha or Luangpur Liam who seem to be able to arouse that kind of energy from their own reserves, but that's pretty rare for most of us ordinary folk. We need something a bit more. One of the things in the Sutta of the Wilderness of the Heart, it talks about eating also. It says that this is one of the shackles, one of the 5 shackles of the heart is when one is overly intent on eating a lot at the mealtime. And when one is overly intent on eating a lot at the mealtime, then after the meal one engages in drowsing, lolling, and lazily stretching. And so that's when that makes it impossible to develop if we aren't able to. Doesn't mean we fast or we don't eat almost anything, but we actually have to figure out the right amount. That's something very important in the spiritual life, to figure out the right amount of food, or of anything, the right amount of food, the right amount of sleep. And there's going to be times when we feel tired. There's going to be times when we don't want to do something that is on the monastic schedule. Then we come back to that teaching of Ajahn Chah. When we want to practice, we practice. When we don't want to practice, we practice. That's that sense of surrender. That's when real progress is going to take place. That's when you don't want to go to morning puja. It's like the slugfest with Mara. He wants to keep you down. So it's like just staying up, just finding those hidden reserves, which all of us have. Tempering it with metta, so there's always this profound balance we're trying to strike with all these practices. One thing that's nice about reading the book Bloom is the last few talks in that book, I was there for those. So the one I read previously, I was actually there for that one. That was the 2014 Pacific Hermitage Retreat at Birkin. And one of the last talks in that retreat, actually, Ajahn Sona surprised all of us. And we'd been sitting quietly, and we were all in metta mode because he'd been giving all these metta talks. Everybody's feeling good. And there wasn't that many people there. There was 18 people, or maybe not even that. Maybe it was 15 people. So it was very like family. And we were all sitting quietly, and then Ajahn Sona started singing. And it was as if his metta teachings weren't enough. He started singing a metta song. And I won't sing it. But it was pretty amazing, and they made that very memorable. So in addition to the energy and the striving and the going without, you temper all of that with the metta that makes it all possible. I'll leave it there for this evening.